So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. We'll leave that poll up for a minute. So my name is Samantha Stryker-Basile, and I am the Adult and Community Services Librarian here at Richmond Memorial. I'm the Richmond Reads Coordinator, and we are very glad you could join us for our second year of Richmond Reads. This program obviously looks a little different since we're online, but we're looking forward to a great evening with our author, Allen. First, so we've done the poll, so that's wonderful, and thank you all for replying to that. And then I wanted to just extend a very special thank you to our friends of the library who have made this program entirely possible through their support. They fund most of our programs. They're our main fundraising group here at the library, and we are very grateful for their generosity in sponsoring this program. I'd also like to thank my wonderful committee. My committee is Sue Briggs, Sue Chitty, Leslie DeLuce, Cindy Hagelberger, Irene Hickey, and Judy Sikora. And they attend countless meetings. They have read dozens of books, and they lend their consideration to all of our decisions to make this program very meaningful. And I appreciate their time and talents, and they truly do a remarkable job. We are also glad this year for Genesee Community College's participation. I know we have several on from the college this evening, and thank you for joining us. We had hoped to have a bit more of a partnership this year, but obviously 2020 has different plans for everything. So we do look forward to a continuing partnership next year and for other programs. Liftbridge Books provided the books for sale for this evening. If you'd like to purchase a copy, you can do so at the library. We'll have them for at least a week after the program. So you can purchase them here, or you can purchase one from Liftbridge if you're interested. Everybody who registered for tonight's event will be entered to win one of 3 signed copies of the book. Allen was very generous and sent us 5 signed copies. 2 of them, though, will go to winners of our review contest. So we're very happy to announce that the winners of our review contest this year were Jessica Beal and Jason Smith. So they won a signed copy of the book and a gift certificate to a local restaurant. Their reviews will be posted on the Richmond Reads site, and we thank them very much for their contributions, and thank you for all who participated in that. So tonight's program will consist of a talk by Allen about the book, followed by questions that have been submitted by you, our readers. If you have questions for the author, you can type them into the chat, and we'll try to keep an eye on that. We also have a list of questions that have been submitted ahead of time by all of you, so we certainly appreciate that as well. And we'll be asking those during the second part of the program tonight. So as I said, this is the second year that we've had the privilege to present Richmond Reads to our library community. We settled on the book selection this year, much earlier this year, and then the unthinkable happened when everything shut down with the pandemic. After the dust started settling, I reached out to my committee to see if they'd be willing to meet virtually and to see if they thought that we could make a virtual program possible. They were unanimous in their resounding yes, agreeing that the message of this book is too important not to share. And then I reached out to Allen, and he was very easygoing. He said, you know, pretty much whatever we wanted to do, he was game for. So in Nothing More Dangerous, we meet 15-year-old Bodie at a pivotal moment in his life. He hates his school and wants nothing more than to escape his town as soon as he can. The unexpected arrival of a new friend, growing awareness of the world around him, and the disappearance of a local woman all play their part in this beautifully told coming-of-age story. The committee knew pretty instinctively that this was the one, the book, when we read it, with its resounding themes of family, race, love, justice, grief, friendship, and so much more. So I am very honored tonight to welcome the author of Nothing More Dangerous, all the way from Minnesota, Allen Eskens. So we're gonna switch the spotlight over to Allen. Let me do all the technology stuff. Okay, Allen.
We're good? You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, Thank you for inviting me. I was really looking forward to coming to Batavia. I regret not being able to, given the pandemic, but I am very pleased to be here virtually. And I am not someone who, from an early age, was destined to be a writer. If you'd have known me back when I was in grade school and high school, you would not have expected me to end up here. But I want to talk a little bit about my journey to becoming a writer, because that journey is really the reason why this book exists. So my journey starts with, I think I found the reason why I'm a writer written on the back of my first grade report card. What my teacher had written to my mother was, "Alan dreams too much when work is to be done in school." I was a huge daydreamer. I loved daydreaming. It was my favorite part of school. I could look out a window, see a reflection of something, and I was gone. And for that reason and many others, I was not a good student. I got just good enough grades to go from one grade to the next. And I really didn't have the desire to do well in school. And part of that was, I come from a blue-collar background. My father owned a drywall company. And so I always kind of figured that I was going to go into construction when I got out of school. So I didn't really need good grades or a good education. And that was really my plan and my path until I got into fifth grade. And when I was in fifth grade, something happened that changed the course of my life. And it happened because of a teacher. When I was in fifth grade, my fifth grade teacher got me into the school play. Now, when I say she got me into the play, I didn't even know the school was putting on a play. And to be in the play, you had to be a sixth, seventh, or eighth grader, which I wasn't. Now, my teacher went to the eighth grade teacher who was directing the play and got special permission from me to audition for this play. And I got a part. And not only did I get a part, I got the best part in the whole play, which wasn't the lead. The best part in the whole play was the only character who got to say a cuss word. I went to a Catholic school in the 1970s. And when I said my line on stage, I was a prisoner who was about to be hanged. And there was this priest trying to get me to confess my sins. And he said, "Are you sure you won't confess your sins?" And I said, "Yes, I'm sure. Damn it, go away." And when I said, "Damn it," the little kids, grades 1 through 4, the first audience, their eyes popped, and I became a celebrity. Everybody knew me. I was the kid who got to say damn on stage. And I thought, I like this acting stuff. Well, my school didn't have any more plays. So I went back to my old ways of being a very poor student. And by the time I graduated 8th grade, I really did not like school. I was apathetic. I just wanted it to be done. So I get into high school, and I actually vowed when I got in high school, I wasn't going to do anything extracurricular. I wasn't going to give anything more to the school. I wasn't going to put in any more effort than I absolutely had to get through and get done. Well, the spring of my freshman year, my school put on a play, Oklahoma. And I was telling my best friend about this play I did in 5th grade and how much fun it was. And by the end of that conversation, we had basically dared each other to try out for Oklahoma. Well, we both got in, and it was a blast. I had so much fun. And the really cool thing about high school plays versus the play I did in 5th grade was at the end of the play, on that last night when the curtain comes down, everybody's going around hugging everybody else. And here I am, this geeky freshman getting hugged by these beautiful junior and senior women. And I'm thinking, why would anybody play football when they could do this? So I become Allen theater guy. I found something that I was passionate about. It made me want to go to school. And I got straight A's in anything that was theater course, anything that was theater related, which was important because I was getting C's, D's, and F's in my other classes. I still didn't think that I was smart enough to go to college, but I was having fun doing theater. And by the time I became a senior, I realized that I had to make a decision. I could give up my theater and go hang sheetrock, go into construction, or I could go to college and stave off this, this drywall job for just a little bit longer. And that was really the reason why I went to college, was just I wanted to do theater just for a little bit more before I had to give it up. So I try to get my grades up my senior year, and I get my GPA up to a solid 2.5. But I did well on the ACT and got into the University of Iowa. And there I studied theater, I studied dance, voice. I had a plan to spend 2 years at college studying theater and then go to New York City and spend the rest of my life in New York City as an actor. Well, I never made it to New York City. I found out that I was actually pretty good at being a student. During the course of being in college, I started studying things that I never thought I would study. And I found that I had a thirst for it. And eventually I changed my major from theater to journalism, finished my degree at the University of Minnesota. And I was doing so well at the end of my college years. I was getting almost straight A's. I wondered what it would have been like if I had tried from the very beginning. And really for no better reason than to test that theory, I went to law school. And I loved law school. I did very well in law school. I graduated with a wonderful resume. And I get a job. So I graduated in December of 91. I get a job that summer, 1992. I'm sitting at my desk and something is missing. Something important. And what was missing was that passion that I had for my creative side when I was in theater. And I felt I needed something to do to scratch that creative itch. So I sat down and I wrote this short story about a 15-year-old boy named Bodie Sandin. And I finished writing that story and I thought, I really like this kid. I like the character that I created. But I had never taken a creative writing class before. I had no idea if what I'd written was any good. So I bought a book on writing technique. And I read that book, went back to my short story, did some more writing of it, bought another book, read it, went back to my story. Then I started taking classes. I took classes at the Iowa Summer Writers Festival in Iowa City. I took classes at the Loft Literary Center in Minneapolis. And then eventually I entered the MFA program in Minnesota State, Mankato, where I lived. I was building my law career, and on the side for 20 years, I was studying writing. And I was studying writing because I wanted to make this story about this 15-year-old boy named Bodie Sandin better and better and better. So after 20 years of studying and writing and rewriting and revising, I realized that this story wasn't finished and I didn't know why. It wasn't ready. So I put it aside and I wrote another manuscript. And the reason I wrote another manuscript was because I found something new that I was passionate about. I loved telling stories. I loved writing. Whether I ever got published, it was always a dream. It'd be nice to get published. But in the end, I was writing stories because I needed to. There's a famous quote by Rilke, Marie Renier Rilke, in Letters to a Young Poet, where Rilke is asked, "How do I know if I'm a writer?" And Rilke answered, "Ask yourself in your most solemn moments, must I write? If the answer to that is yes, you are a writer and you should conform your life accordingly." Well, when I read that, I realized I was successful as an attorney. I had a good practice, but in my heart, I was a writer. So I was going to keep writing for my own joy. And so I wrote my second manuscript. And when I finished that one, I thought this was good enough. It's ready. I think it's ready to go get published. So I sought out an agent. And over the course of a year, I was rejected by 150 agents. And while I was being rejected by those agents, I wrote another manuscript because that's what I did now. I was a writer. Well, right at the end of that year, I got an agent. And that became my first published novel. It's called The Life We Bury. Came out in the fall of 2014. And after giving it to my agent, we did a revision, we sent it out, and within a few weeks had 2 offers for publication. So now I'm going to be a published author. Well, this 3rd manuscript that I'd written, I took a character from the life of Barry, a secondary character named Max Rupert, who was a homicide detective, and I told a story about him. So I went back to my agent and I said, I got this new book here about Max. I want to do a 3-book arc for Max's character. And before The Life of Barry came out on store shelves, I had a contract for 3 more books for Max Rupert. So now I'm up and running. I'm a writer. So I finished The Life of Barry. It came out to wonderful acclaim. It became a bestseller, a book club favorite, and I got to go to New York City for the Edgar Award. I was a finalist for the Edgar Award. And so I left high school at the age of 18 thinking I was going to do 2 years of college and spend the rest of my life in New York City as an actor. I never got there until I went there as a writer for The Life of Barry. So The Life of Barry came out, did very well. I then published the 3 books that I did for Max Rupert, a 3-book arc for his character. And then I went back, my publisher wanted me to write a sequel for The Life of Barry, which I was more than happy to do. I wrote, it's called The Shadows We Hide. So my 5th book was The Shadows We Hide. When I finished my 5th book, I knew it was time to go back and pull out that piece, that manuscript I've been working on for 20 years. And I didn't actually pull it out. What I did was, I knew the story, I knew the characters. They've been living with me ever since I started the story back in 1992. But over the course of writing these other novels, I was learning more and more about my style and writing novels. And so I sat down and I outlined this book from the beginning to the end as if I'd never written it before. And then I started writing it without looking at the old manuscript because I didn't want to make the same mistakes that I had fallen into when I was first learning how to be a writer. So I rewrote Nothing More Dangerous, and it was the same story with the same characters, but it is a far richer book now than what it was before. And it came out last year, November of 2019. It is coming out in paperback, actually on Election Day, November 3rd, 2020. And it is literally the book I became a writer to write. It tells a story of a 15-year-old boy who he's very unhappy with his life, with his circumstance. He lives in a small town called Jessup, Missouri. He lives on a dead-end gravel road with his mother. And his mother has never quite gotten over the death of Bodie's father. And so there's this coldness in the house. Next door to Bodie, there's this older gentleman named Hoke Gardner. Hoke has been there since Bodie's earliest memories. But over the course of this summer, of this story, Bodie learns that Hoke has a secret in his past. And Hoke has a journey to take in this novel. Down at the end of the road, there's a drywall company of all things. And the guy, Bodie and his mother both work at this drywall company. And the guy who owns the drywall company has a journey of his own. And that's it, as far as people living on this dead-end gravel road out in the woods. Except there is a Victorian house, a beautiful Victorian house that's been sitting empty for 5 years since his last owner had died. And the story begins in the summer of 1976 when a family moves into that house. And that family is black, where Bodie is white. And over the course of that summer, Bodie becomes friends with the son of this family. His name is Thomas. And he starts to see the world through Thomas's eyes. Now, this book is a mystery. There's a missing woman named Lyda Poe, who is believed to have embezzled a lot of money and took off. There is a story of redemption. It's a story of friendship. It's a story of family and community. It is really a book that is worthy of the 27 years I spent writing it. I'm very, very pleased with how it turned out. And it is, I believe, going to be my magnum opus. But now, if you would indulge me, I'm going to read just a little bit from the novel. And here's the novel. The place I'm going to read is fairly deep into the book. It's Bodie and Thomas. Thomas is the neighbor. We're walking down a dirt road, and a pickup truck, an old pickup truck, comes past, and a guy reaches out of the truck and swings a broom handle at them, hitting Bodie. Now, this is Bodie going to tell Hoke about this incident. After supper, Mom went home and I stayed behind to help Thomas with the dishes. Mom's idea, not mine. After dishes, I said my goodbyes. Outside on the western horizon, the tail end of a storm broke high above the hills, and the setting sun exploded against the clouds in waves of gold and purple and red. As I took a moment to admire the colors, I heard the screech of Hoke's front door. Figuring he hadn't probably heard all that happened, I made my way over to tell him about the attack, laying the story out in great detail because Hoke, more than anyone I knew, appreciated the small details. He studied my expression during most of the retelling, but toward the end, he let his gaze wander out to the woods, looking at nothing in particular, just slowly moving his head from side to side. When I finished, he gave a sigh and said, "I'm sorry, Bodie." "What are you sorry for?" I said. "You didn't do nothing." "I should have warned you about the danger," he said. "Remember when we talked about folks trying to feel like they belong by putting others down, us versus them?" "Yeah." "Well, it runs much deeper than that." Hoke leaned back in his chair, fixing his eyes on something far away, like he did when he was about to go deep. "In a perfect world," he said, "ignorant notions should die a quick death. A thing like racism, if you can't find a kindred spirit, it's like a dog barking at a stone. But if you can find just one other person who thinks like you, well, even the most irrational beliefs can grow roots. Small-minded people feed off each other, and before you know it, you have mobs and burning crosses and lynchings. But we didn't do nothing to them. They had no cause to come after us. And like that, they don't need much in the way of cause. All it takes is a couple guys angry over something, looking for someone to blame. It's like Dr. King said, nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance. Sometimes I think that's the truest thing a man's ever said. He was swinging for my head like he wanted to kill me. Bodie, you ever heard of a boy named Emmett Till? Was he from Jessup? No. Emmett Till was a black kid from Chicago. He was 14 back in 1955 when he took a trip down to visit some relatives in Mississippi. While he was there, he talked to a white woman. Not long after that, a couple good old boys with guns took Emmett from his uncle's house. Just took him. 3 days later, they found the boy's body in a river with a cotton gin fan tied around his neck. Jesus. And all because they didn't like the way he talked to a white woman. But that was a long time ago, before I was even born. They put a stop to all that because they passed those civil rights laws. Bodie, the men who beat and murdered those folks for all those years, you think they simply disappeared because someone passed a law? A quiet sadness wrapped around Hoke's words as he spoke, as though he held himself responsible for the sins of other people. Do you think those folks just figured out that what they was doing was wrong and went home? No, but things are different, ain't they? I wish to God they were. But that stuff still happens. Maybe not in the way it did to Emmett Till, but it's out there. Always will be. Not always. People change. People can change if they want to, but the sad truth is that humans are hardwired to be prejudiced. It's passed down from ancestors who were just trying to figure out what to fear and what to hunt. We learn to separate things into good and bad, and that particular human frailty is alive and well in every one of us. It's not a matter of if we have prejudices. We do. It's a matter of understanding those instincts and fighting against them. Hope pulled out his pipe and worked through the ritual of packing tobacco into it. I wanted to argue against what he'd said, but frankly, his story about Emmett Till scared the crap out of me. And I began to contemplate the short walk between getting hit with a broom handle and getting beat to death with it. So I wrote that that passage back in 1992, 93, early 90s, about how the world was when I was growing up in Missouri in the 1970s. And I wrote it with the belief that it may never see the light of day as a novel, but the message in there is one that resonates today. There is a growing tension between us and them, and that tension is oxygen to a fire, and it's bringing people out who were hiding. It's like Hope said, you think those people just went home and changed their minds because someone passed the law? I wrote Nothing More Dangerous in large part to exercise the ghosts that I had. So this character of Bodhi is very much who I was when I was 15 years old. There's racial slurs and racial jokes in the book, which every one of those is one that I either said or heard growing up in the 70s in Missouri. And like Bodhi, if you'd asked me back then if I had prejudices, I'd have probably said, no, I don't, because I truly believed I didn't. At the same time, I held deep inside me this core belief that there was a difference between me and someone of a different color, and that I held superiority over that person just because of my skin color. It wasn't something that I carried like a badge or wore on my sleeve. It was very insidious and quiet and subtle. And it came out in small ways. So after I left home and went to college, I started to learn about myself. And the journey that Bodhi takes in the novel in the course of one summer is a journey that I took over the course of several years. Coming to understand that I have these instincts to judge people by superficial means, for superficial means. And I have to always be aware of that and ask myself, is my judgment of this person based on something other than the color of their skin, the religion they practice, their sexual orientation? And it has led me to come to a place where I realize that I think, like Hoke says, we all have this inclination, this instinct. And if you're not aware of it, then you will let it control you more than you controlling it. So that was why I wrote the book. That's why I became a writer, was to give that message. I'm very pleased with how it's been received. It's got such wonderful reviews, and people like Richmond Memorial Library have read it and liked it and saw the teaching value of it. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I'll be happy to answer questions now.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me play around with the screen here for a second. Lovely technology. Okay, well, we'll just start with our first question while I figure out our screen here. So first of all, have you ever been to Western New York? We're located between Buffalo and Rochester, Little Batavia.
I have not. My first 4 novels were published by 7th Street Book, which is an imprint of Prometheus Publishing out of, I want to say Buffalo, but it's actually next to Buffalo. It's I can't think of the town right now, but a suburb of Buffalo. And I have not been to Buffalo or Batavia. I've been to Toronto, which I think is close, but
Yeah.
not to Buffalo. And that's one of the reasons I was looking forward to coming to Batavia, because I would have flown into Buffalo and I was going to have coffee or lunch with some of my friends from my previous publisher, but I wasn't able to do that.
Yes. Yeah, we are very close to Toronto, which normally is great, but you, of course, can't go across the border right now. So.
That's right.
So I'm going to just go through some of our questions that we've had submitted by our readers. And readers, if you have other questions, feel free to put those in the chat. But first, you did talk about your path to writing. But in terms of your process, what does a typical day of writing look like for you?
Well, because I come to writing as a daydreamer, I have different phases of writing a novel. The first phase is just daydreaming about it. I will think about a novel for years before I write it. So right now I'm finishing up my 7th novel. I have my 8th novel fairly well drafted in my head. I have ideas for a 9th and 10th novel. So I let them stew and percolate for a long time, and I give a lot of thought before I sit down to write. But then what I do is I get out a sketch pad and I take these ideas and I start just writing them down and outlining. I will spend months just doing the outlining process. When I'm finished outlining, I have a list of plot points and I know the entire story from beginning to end before I sit down to write it. That's important to me because nothing more dangerous. I just came to it and started writing without thinking it through. And it took me 27 years. My 2nd novel, I outlined it. It took me 2 years. My 3rd novel, outlined it. Took me 1 year. So I'm getting better, but I know that I need to have that outline so that I make my mistakes in the thought process, not when I'm writing. I don't want to write 20,000 words on a tangent thinking that's brilliant, and then all of a sudden I'm boxed in and have to try and when you've written that many words, you don't want to give them up, even if they are leading you to a place where you're stuck. So I try and make my mistakes in the outlining process. Get the outline finished, I know the story, I sit down and just try and do 5,000 words a week until I have a first draft done. Then it's revision, and like the novel I worked on today, have been revising it since April. So it's in the final stages of revision. Actually, I will be turning it into my editor on November 1st, and then I'll sit down and start, go back to my outline of my next novel and start working, fleshing out the outline a little more. But I'll go down, I work in my basement in a comfortable recliner. Mm-hmm. I work for a few hours, have lunch, work for a few more hours. I'm very relaxed. I take naps almost daily. I've discovered that the key to taking a nap is, number 1, grow old. Number 2, sit down. So it comes easily for me now.
That's great advice. We should all take naps. I firmly believe that. So one of our attendees just asked, and it kind of ties in to one of our kind of heavier questions, but obviously, well, we chose this book for many reasons, one being that the rural setting is very familiar to us here. It could have been set in Genesee County, New York, just as much as it was in Missouri. So we could relate to it on that level. We could relate to a lot of the characters, but another significant reason was that obviously a lot of the conflicts in this book are situations that we could be seeing today in America. As much as we'd like to say that racism is a thing of the past, clearly it's not. Clearly we're seeing more incidents and more us versus them and those sorts of things. So our reader mentioned that when you were writing this in 92 to 93, it's around the time of Rodney King. Obviously you wrote this before George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests began, but was there a specific incident or experience that inspired you as you were writing the book, or was it kind of the culmination of your childhood?
It was a culmination of my childhood. It wasn't any specific incident. And it came about, I think, in part because I went back and I was supposed to read To Kill a Mockingbird in high school. Because I was a bad student, I didn't read it. I didn't read most of the books they wanted me to read in high school. But as I was studying writing, I went back and read it for the first time, To Kill a Mockingbird. And I didn't really have a journey for Bodhi before that. And I realized in reading To Kill a Mockingbird that it focused on a more overt form of racism, the Jim Crow era racism. And I grew up thinking that I wasn't racist or prejudiced because I didn't believe blacks and whites should drink out of different drinking fountains or not sit at the same lunch counters. So I thought, because I don't subscribe to those notions, I'm not racist. So what I wanted to do was write a book that told my version of coming to understand racism post-civil rights era. That it's much quieter, much more subtle. And it's things like the terms, when Bodhi says something to Thomas about rigging a fishing pole, that in Bodhi's mind is perfectly okay. It's not racist because it's just an expression, but it's not okay. And he needs to come to understand there's a reason why these words are used, and these reasons have a history to them and a weight to them. And so it was me trying to explain and maybe understand that aspect of myself when I was growing up.
Thank you. Another reader asked the question, what was your process behind developing the role of Thomas, and did you struggle with the responsibility of portraying the experiences of African Americans?
Because I needed to have Bodhi go through something in a short period of time, I had to put in Thomas. I could have had Bodhi come to this realization over several years like I did, but that wouldn't have worked. So I needed a catalyst to spark or light the fire under Bodhi to change. And that's really why Thomas was there. But yes, I did struggle with writing that character. In fact, I had a good friend of mine from law school, a black woman who grew up in Oklahoma. She's my age. She knew that era. I had her read the manuscript before I sent it out because I wanted to make sure that I had portrayed Thomas well. And what my friend told me was there was a class of people, the black bourgeoisie, in that period of time, and Thomas's family fit into that mold. But even though I tried to be careful in how I described Thomas, I did make some mistakes that were based on my preconceived notions. And she wrote back and said, I would probably change these things because they have a racist connotation that I didn't even see or know about. So, I was very concerned about that.
So Hoke is also a favorite among readers. Our book discussions, everybody was kind of asking and wondering how you created Hoke's character. He's kind of a man who doesn't say a whole lot, but when he does speak, it's pretty powerful. Do you have a specific inspiration for him?
Hoke came about because I read a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. So when I decided I wanted to take writing seriously, that was actually the first book I read. And it's by Joseph Campbell, and it breaks down storytelling throughout the eons. And it finds what's consistent from story to story. And it goes into great detail about the hero, the protagonist, the antagonist. And then there's the mentor character. And then the purpose of the mentor character is to guide the protagonist along his or her journey. And so having read Joseph Campbell, I thought I need to have a mentor character in this story. So I created him for that reason. But with that said, as this story evolved over 27 years, Hoke's character grew and grew and grew. So really, when you read the story, there's a scene where they're at a parish picnic. And at the end of that parish picnic, there's a scene where really Bodhi's journey ends at that point. He has made his decision where he stands. The rest of the story is about Hoke. It is a resolution of Hoke's journey, which comes about because of Bodhi. So, the story of Hoke is beloved by most readers, and it was a joy writing Hoke. And it was if I had tried to publish this novel any earlier than I did, I think Hoke's role would not have been as fulfilling.
Definitely. Yeah, he's kind of the glue for the whole plot, and yeah. So another reader asked, the question is, in one of my favorite scenes, Bodhi and Thomas go tree jumping while on a camping trip. In many years of climbing trees and walking in the woods, the thought to do this never occurred to me. Is this a regional activity or a lethal dare devised by teenage boys?
It is amazing how many people ask me about that. I tree jumped. I grew up in the woods of Missouri. One day, a group of us, I know my sister was there, and there were a few others, but I can't remember who they were, but my older sister was with us. We're walking in the woods, and we see this cedar tree, and the top was flat, like it had been busted off by a deer or something when it was a sprig. And we climbed this tree, and somebody, I think me, decided to just slide down the branches rather than climb down. And so I slid down, and it was cool. Somebody else slid down, and we spent an afternoon just climbing this tree and sliding down the branches. So when you live out in the woods, you kind of make your fun where you can find it.
Lots of us can relate to that here. Never jumped out of a tree though, so fell out of a tree, but it's not the same.
Many times.
Yeah. Another character who obviously drives most of the conflict in the plot is Cecil. He isn't necessarily direct, he's more of a peripheral character, but you know through the interactions of the other characters that he's behind the disappearance of Lyda Poe, the attacks on Bodhi and Thomas, a lot of the negative action in the plot. Some of our readers were curious about what actually happened to him, and will we learn any more in future books?
I don't know what happened to him, and no, you won't learn any more. So I suspect he's dead.
Don't care what happened to him.
Well, I left it. So the antagonistic force in this novel is actually 4 people. There's no single antagonist, but it's a spectrum of the racist force. So at the top you have Cecil. He's the head of the family, and he controls it, even though there's evidence in the novel that he doesn't believe in his own racist rhetoric. He's using it for more financial gain than actual hatred. The next level down is Milo. Milo is a true soldier. Milo believes in his heart that there's a white supremacy in the order of things. Next level down is Jarvis. Jarvis is trying to live up to his father's expectations. The next one is Angus. Angus really doesn't believe it, but it's what the family does. And so he just goes along to get along. So there's these 4 levels. And in the end, I leave it open as to what happens to Cecil, because racism is still out there. That is kind of a metaphor for the racism going into hiding, that you can't necessarily see it, but it's there. So that's why I left that question open.
That's a wonderful metaphor, especially the way that we're seeing agency being given to racism now in a lot of ways. It's not that it wasn't there before, it's just that we didn't see it. Yes. So what are you mentioned that you're working on a novel right now. What are you working on right now?
So
whatever you can tell us.
My debut novel, The Life We Bury, is the story of a college student named Joe Talbot. In that novel, he meets Lila Nash, and they fall in love. My fifth novel, which is The Shadows We Hide, is the sequel. Joe and Lila are still together in that book, but in both those books, and also in The Heavens May Fall, she plays a minor role, a secondary character. The next book is her story. So the background that I gave her in The Life We Bury and The Shadows We Hide is what she will be facing in her story, which is called The Stolen Hours.
Wonderful, thank you. Which writers or books have influenced you? You've mentioned a few books, obviously, that have been instrumental to you. But do you have any particularly favorite writers or books that that you haven't mentioned that have influenced you?
Yes. I was heavily influenced by Where the Red Fern Grows. I read that book. That was one of the few books in high school, or I think it was freshman year, that I read, that I did read it. And I cried. And here I am, this teenage boy crying about a book. They're just words on paper. And so I read it a second time. It's the first time I ever read a book twice. And I read it a second time just to prove that I could read it without crying. And son of a gun, I couldn't. So that was very influential. The Outsiders was influential for me because I felt like I was Pony Boy. I was a poor student. I was a greaser. I was a kid who hung out with, I was one of those kids you didn't want your kids hanging around with. My friends and I, for 8th grade graduation, threw a kegger. So, I smoked, I drank, but for theater, I'd be a very different person now. But so, yeah, Pony Boy was very influential for me. As an adult, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver, White Oleander, Janet Fitch. There's a great many. No Country for Old Men, which teaches the lesson that you can write a thriller and still be a literary novelist. I mean, his writing is spectacular. I'm one of those who I don't believe that there are strict lines between literary and genre. I think that you could write a mystery and have that mystery be a literary story. I mean, the Life We Bury, it's really a story about a young man who wants to get away from his autistic brother and his responsibility for that brother. So I will, to my dying day, believe that I am writing literary novels that are mysteries or thrillers, or Nothing More Dangerous is really more of a coming of age story than it is a mystery. The mystery in that novel is really, it's not the centerpiece. It's more of a thread to weave the various aspects of the story together.
Yeah, and we talked about that a lot in our discussions, that there's a lot of mysteries in the book. There's, the mystery of Hoke, the mystery of Bodhi discovering who his parents are. And so certainly there's the main, Lida Poe is missing, but there's so many other intriguing parts of the plot as well that we're waiting to uncover. So one of the intriguing parts of the plot, I would say that probably one of the most tense parts for me reading was when Bodhi and Thomas find themselves in the church and realize that it's kind of the headquarters for the core group, and their activities obviously cast a dark shadow over the whole book. Was that group inspired by a real organization that you were aware of, or just in these regional white supremacist groups in general?
Yeah, growing up in Missouri, we had groups like that out in the woods, mostly in southern Missouri. There's one group in particular that was rather famous, the Cross, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, I think it was called. But yeah, they were, when the KKK was disbanded as a national organization, it splintered into small groups. Those small groups found homes in the woods, in the mountains. And today they call them militias, but quite frankly, they're not militias. They're just racist KKK wannabes, like I describe them in the book. And so yeah, they were out there. I never actually saw one of their camps, but there was a news story that came out. There was a murder. I think it was a DJ in Colorado, and he fled to one of these organizations' camps, and that they had a lot of coverage on it in the news and explaining what it was. And so as a teenager, I saw that, and that kind of inspired the core.
Thank you. We did have a participant ask how long it took you to go through law school.
2.5 years. However, it took me 7 years to get through undergrad. I kept having to, I changed my major a lot of times. I transferred and lost a lot of credits when I transferred, and I was working my own way through school. So, when I was in Iowa, I was hanging sheetrock Monday, Wednesday, Friday, going to school Tuesdays and Thursdays and weekends. And I was working for one of my professors as a handyman on weekends, a security guard on Friday nights at the Holiday Inn. So it was, every now and again I could only take like 12 hours at a time to, and then every now and again I had to quit and hang sheetrock full time to earn enough money to go back to school.
The well-rounded education.
I can do well on Jeopardy.
Yes. So you did talk about it, but the leap from drama to law to writing, it's quite an amazing journey. How much has your career as an attorney influenced your writing?
When I was studying to be a writer for those 20 years and I was practicing law, I actually told myself I wasn't going to write a mystery. And I did that because I'd taken a class in mystery writing and was very disappointed. The teacher taught a formula. Here's the formula for writing a mystery. And I was studying to be a literary novelist, and I was focusing on character development and richer themes. And here he's just like, by this point you have a murder, by this point you do this. But the more I started reading other authors, the more I realized that you could write a literary story and have it be a mystery. Dennis Lehane, Mystic River is a perfect example. That was an influential book for me. When you look at that, the mystery isn't really the centerpiece of that story. It's the story of 3 boys. One of them was kidnapped and escaped, who then as adults, one of their daughters is murdered. And the murder is just a catalyst to bring these 3 men together and show how what happened to them at age 11 changed who they are and who they became. I read that novel and I thought, I want to tell stories like that. And I'm an attorney. I know courtrooms. I know investigations. I'm going to just use my knowledge as a vehicle to tell these other human stories.
Thank you. I lost my train of thought here. What are you reading right now, if anything?
I'm reading actually 50 pages. A friend of mine sent me for he and his wife are writing a mystery, so I'm reading that right now. I don't know if the title escapes me, but it's not even published yet. What else am I reading? What I tend to do is I tend to read books that will influence. I just finished Longmire, my first Longmire novel, and I've downloaded another book that I haven't started yet. But I read books that will influence or inform the novel I'm writing next. So I'm finishing up Lila's story. So I've been reading. I listen to my novels. Actually, I don't read them. I'm not a very good reader, so I listen to them. So I've been listening to novels written by women with women protagonists because I want to make sure that I understand the flavor that goes into writing a female character. I don't want to write a male character and just give it a female name and female body parts. And Janet Fitch's White Oleander was important in how I wanted to, the voice in my head that I wanted to hear as I wrote my own words is modeled after that book. The Silence of the Lambs, because one of the characters in this novel is kind of an evil person. So I listen to that while I'm writing to try and get that voice in my head. So because my next novel will be Max Rupert, and it'll be kind of an Unforgiven story, so to speak. I'm reading and listening to buddy stories. I'm listening to, country sheriff stories like Longmire, to get that feeling in my head before I start writing it.
Excellent. And I have not listened to the audiobook, but I've heard nothing but wonderful things about the audio for Nothing More Dangerous. And I think that can.
I haven't listened to it either. But I've heard wonderful things.
Mm-hmm.
I went online and looked for narrators who specialize in Southern storytelling and found Kevin Stillwell and sent his name to my publisher, said, can you get this guy to do it? Because I was so impressed with what I had listened to him do for other authors. So I've heard nothing but good things about his narration.
Yeah, I know that the writer doesn't always get the choice of who narrates their book. So that's
it was important. They had my publisher had actually sent me 3 names, and not a one of them had a Southern accent. No, you can't do that. This has to be a Southern accent.
Definitely important. Does anyone have any more questions? You can go ahead and throw them in the chat. This has been an absolutely wonderful discussion. What is the main thing? We've talked about obviously a lot of things about the book, but what is the main thing you hope that readers can take away from Nothing More Dangerous?
The 2 words that reviewers have written a lot, and the 2 words that I wanted to hear were emotional and thoughtful. Emotional and thought-provoking. I want people to read this story and feel something. I want them to, if they cry or don't cry, I want them to feel something. Tolstoy once wrote that the purpose of art is to convey to others the deepest feelings of humankind. And as a writer, that's my goal. I want to use my words, my stories, to make you feel something. The second thing is I want to make you think, especially with this book. I want to make you question yourself. Do I have latent, hidden prejudices that I'm not aware of? And because I, as a human being, do have them. And I think that everybody has them if they look hard enough. And so that's one of the other things I want people to think, come away from this book with that kind of idea in their head.
Absolutely. We discussed that quite a lot in our discussions, that everyone's born with these inherent, everyone's raised with these inherent biases, and it's what you do with them. If you stop evolving, if you stop learning and growing, that's when it becomes really dangerous. And if you refuse to change. Another question is that your bio states that you live in outstate Minnesota. What or where is that?
I should probably change that to Greater Minnesota, because it's the Twin Cities. Mm-hmm. Everything else is Greater Minnesota. I'm in the southern part of the state near Mankato, but there are some people who take offense to outstate as if you're second class, but it's I probably change that. But it's Greater Minnesota. I live in the farm country.
We understand that. We get New York City a lot, so we're we're the other part. Right. We're upstate. So thank you for that. I don't think there are any more questions, but I just really want to thank you for sharing with us and sharing your time and visiting with us in this way. And any other remarks or comments that you'd like to make?
I want to thank you for inviting me, and I deeply regret not being able to be there in person. Maybe under other circumstances we can do this sometime, but I really am appreciative, and it was fun talking to y'all. And if you haven't read the novel, I hope you have a chance to, and I hope you enjoy it.
Yes, there were some spoilers, so I hope you have read it. That's one of our policies for book discussions, is that you have to expect spoilers. So.
Okay.
No problems there. So thank you again, everybody, for coming tonight. We do truly appreciate it. And as I mentioned, tonight's program was sponsored by our friends of the library. Our friends support most of our programming And as you know, this year has been challenging since they haven't been able to fundraise. So if you did enjoy the program and would like to support future programs, I would encourage you to consider a donation to our friends. I will be sending a follow-up email to everybody who registered. And then the other thing is that we do, I'd like to thank Alan. He sent us a number of signed book plates, and I know many of you purchased a copy of the book. So those will be available at the library on a first come, first served basis. You can come right to the reference desk for those. And those will be available starting tomorrow. So thank you, everybody. And I hope everybody has a wonderful night. And thank you, Alan. This was truly wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.